Okay, I'm going to call to order the special meeting of the Reading City Council on March 26, 2020 at 5:15 p.m. If we could please have a roll call.
Joining us this evening by teleconference, Councilmember DeQuisto, Councilmember Resner,
Present.
Councilmember Schrader, here. Winter, here. And Mayor McIlvaine.
Here, thank you. So we'll move on to our regular calendar, item 9.1B, and Mr. Tippin.
Thank you, Honorable Mayor. I'll just make this very brief. The meeting of March 3rd is where the council took up the item of the Reading Electric Utility Financial Management Policy, and there was a very detailed presentation provided in terms of how that policy works and what are the current metrics that apply to our current situation and our current holdings, if you will. After that presentation, the council voted to take approximately $2 million of REU reserves and to distribute them to the customers. And the item tonight is simply to approve a resolution that would appropriate that money so that it could be distributed in that manner. In addition, the council wanted us to provide information on how that would happen, and the utility has determined the best way to do that is through a credit on the fixed charge of the utility bill. So in other words, a residential individual normally pays $15. There would be a credit of roughly $46. And so the difference would be a negative shown on their bill. And so it would then credit against their kilowatt hour usage as well. And so that's the way in which it would be done. There's some administrative work there, but not much. And so we'd be able to accomplish that in a relatively short time frame should the council approve the resolution tonight. And with that, I'll hand it back to the mayor and see if there's any questions.
Thank you. So I would like to approve this as we approved it on March 3rd. So I'll be looking for a motion and a second.
And there was an alternate resolution to make it $50 each. Is there a reason we're not going to do that?
If that's the motion you want to make, I think that's appropriate.
I would make the motion to approve the alternate resolution at $50 per customer.
Okay. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Any questions?
I would actually like to make a different motion. I cannot approve this motion on the floor, so I would like to make a second motion instead. Okay. Since the council made this decision back in March, our world has turned upside down, and the foundational facts on which we made this decision, the $2 million extra in reserves, I believe that that is no longer the case. And so there's just so much uncertainty right now with our economics. Knowing what we know now about the economy, I don't believe we would have made this decision back in March. So I think this is what I'm going to recommend. Many folks are not going to be able to pay their bills, which will eat into our reserves, and this is going to worsen as the virus has not yet hit our community. And I don't expect peak viral, the peak of the curve to hit until the second or third week in April. REU is not doing shutoffs, which will also eat into our reserves further. Many businesses are closed right now. Think of the Civic, the Cascade, all the colleges and school campuses, large church campuses, all the stores in the mall, movie theaters, restaurants, nail, beauty salons, hotels, all of which generate revenue for REU, not to mention sales tax and TOT tax. This means projected revenue has decreased dramatically, and when you combine that with the recent hit on REU reserves that wasn't budgeted with the NERC-FERC decision, as well as the fact that we're going into a drought year where energy costs will be higher, I really think the picture has changed. So, and the other thing is we are looking at rate increases next year, which would be very devastating considering what's happening with the economy right now. As of this week alone, one in 18 Californians who's employed, 1 million employees in California have declared unemployment. We have 18 million workers, so 1 in 18 workers is unemployed right now. And Reading is heavy in those sectors of people who are unemployed. And so, we have also many small businesses who are shut down. So what I'm going to ask And I know the council, I know all of us up here are concerned about keeping our businesses afloat. I mean, if we think big picture, that's going to be really critical, trying to get through the economics of what we're facing right now. So my motion would be that we request REU to come back at the second meeting in April, which would give them about 3.5 weeks, to come back with an updated financial report based on all of the changes that have just happened within the last month. And that might give us an idea of what the expected revenue drop will be. And then the second part of my motion would be to have REU and our city manager work with business leaders like Jake Mangus, who I know reached out to see if we do have any additional money from reserves or other programs, we might be able to do some kind of a rate reduction for businesses who are really hurting and can't pay their bills, so we can keep those businesses alive. So I think that would be the better use of any additional monies that we have. So that's what I'm requesting, that we not go forward with the original motion, and that we come back the second week in April with a financial report with more information, so we can make a better strategic decision.
Thank you. Councilmember Schrader?
I would second that motion. I'm particularly concerned about we haven't really completely understood the complete financial impact to many of our community members and REU. And for example, if you take an owner of a restaurant or a small business, $46 kind of feels like a Band-Aid when they need a tourniquet. And we need to have a more targeted approach to, at this time, with possibly other revenue sources, other opportunities that REU can find, rather than taking reserves. It's the reserves that kept us whole while we experienced the car fire, which we couldn't have anticipated. Now we are potentially making a decision during a crisis, going in the opposite direction, using our reserves less strategic than we have in all the history of, well, I believe, of REU. The amount of reserves held us tight during the most critical times, and also have kept our rates low. We're paying the same rates that we've been paying since 2014, partly because of the reserves and because of sound management, which this to me would put a stress on REU at a time when we can't afford it. So I'm seconding the motion, and I really urge that we find targeted solutions for our small businesses in Reading, because I think that's who might be the most impacted. As we see, some of the large businesses could get, and small businesses could be eligible for some of the federal money. It's very likely that, in my experience, for schools, whenever schools are impacted, the state comes through and provides remedies, because they generate ADA from having the dollars from having students in class, and they'll come up with something. So there's a lot of people will find resources, and I think we need to target our REU resources to the hardest hit and have the biggest impact for our community.
Okay, I appreciate that. I think that, I understand some of those points that you made. I do think that waiting till the second meeting in April is waiting too long. I think that we need to be, as a city, be more proactive and be part of the solutions and take action, because that's, in the way time is going right now, that seems like forever away, the second meeting in April. I think it's important to honor the commitment that we already made on the $2 million. I would certainly entertain looking at additional funds specifically targeted at businesses and individuals who are impacted by the shutdown. And I think that would, again, add another layer of commitment to the city and our businesses and residents who've been laid off. So I do think it's really important that we approve it as written, and I think there's a lot of expectation that that's going to happen. But again, I think there are other options, and city managers.
Like what other options would there be? Because it may very well be that our reserves aren't what we think. We thought we had that extra $2 million, but I don't know that that's going to be the case, because so many businesses are going to be closed. They're not going to be using energy, so that projected REU revenue will be less than we expected.
I know the city manager wants to make an update after this item on some of the things that they've been working on, but let's hear from Councilmember.
I think Vice Mayor Resner has.
Yes.
Go ahead, Aaron.
I have a little bit of a question, comment, sort of all of the above. I think that it sounds like that everybody uh, seems to have the same sort of feeling, Kristen, that you were saying about a Band-Aid on a tourniquet. I think that all of us would probably in a 5-0 vote agree that we need to discuss what are all of our options at this point in time in regards to RU. My question before we call for a vote, however, is Mr. Tippin, this $2 million that we're taking out of reserves, or that we have desired at the moment to take out of reserves, could that come out of somewhere else? And still potentially, maybe if we brought it back on an item 12 or something, come forward with an additional amount of money from anywhere else. I think that we need to be focused, one, on upholding our word of what it is that we said that we were going to do for the entire population of Reading. But also, I think that everybody would probably agree that we need to do our best to also support those local business owners. And so I'm wondering, is there a way in which that we could do both of those things? That we could keep our word in this $2 million that comes, that we had said would come out of reserves, so that we have 50 to each person, as well as entertaining, or I mean, that may need to be a separate topic that we discuss in item 12, but that's essentially where my head is at, if that made sense to anybody.
Yeah, so the answer to the question, is there a different source of money that could be used, is yes. As we've discussed in the past, greenhouse gas monies, when they first passed the laws and rules and regulations associated with greenhouse gas, gave a provision that you could distribute equally to customers amounts from greenhouse gas allowance. And so you could allocate $2 million of greenhouse gas allowance money in equal distribution to all your customers. And so you could do something similar. I'd have to defer to the attorney as to whether or not the resolution that's before you today could be modified on the fly, because it's a budget resolution. And I suppose perhaps you could give me authority to approve said budget authority in the future, once we got it crafted. But you could do greenhouse gas monies, knowing that that's money that you would divert from other sources or other programs.
And can you?
And then there would still be potential of other funds that would be available for relief efforts, or are you saying that greenhouse gas would be the source, and this $50 to every household would be the extent that RU would probably be able to come up with as far as relief efforts?
No, obviously the $2 million that's in reserves today that the council is discussing could be utilized in a different fashion, keeping in mind just there's risk associated with any distribution you do with reserves, associated with how those rules and regulations are out there, i.e. Prop 26. And then I would also say that RU and the rest of staff continues to work on different ideas on how we can help our community. I was going to bring this up in a future COVID update item, and I'm going to use COVID update as my reason for bringing it up now, which is allowed by executive order now. And ideas that we're kicking around is to bring forward to the council TOT deferrals for 3 months for cash flow for hoteliers, and then they would pay it back over the next 3 months. RU has proposed maybe looking at deposit returns, and so that puts us at risk in terms of people not paying their bills, but it also could infuse cash into households and small businesses. And then RU is also looking at ways in which we can expand low-income type assistance to individuals who have been laid off. And so there are many other ideas that staff are trying to work through to bring to the council. They're just not formulated quite yet, and we were going to bring those in April 7th so that council could have debate and discussion and decision on those.
Mayor, I can't see whether or not you have any thoughts on that.
Well, I do think it's important that we stay with the original proposal as written, but I think it's a good idea, to have staff explore all options, maybe with some parameters, as far as monies that can be targeted specifically to people impacted by the shutdown. And I think that would be a good thing for everybody to see what those options are.
And just to be clear, the greenhouse gas monies must be distributed in equal amounts to all customers, so that is sort of legislated. While you don't have necessarily a significant amount of flexibility with reserves, to the extent it won't affect future increases in rates, you do have more flexibility with reserve funds than you do with greenhouse gas money in that regard.
Can I just ask, that greenhouse gas money, was that going already? Was that committed to a program? What was our plans for that money?
So a lot of it has been committed, but there's also additional funds that are being generated through the current auction. Now that will cut off in a year or so. But I believe the number that we have unallocated in our programs is in excess of $2 million. Is that correct? Yeah. So we have in the neighborhood of 3 to 5. But we also are developing other programs to help the general fund through energy efficiency updates that have to be done. So, it does have impacts to redirect those funds, but certainly that's within the council's prerogative to decide to do so.
Here's my concern: as we come back, let's say we come back in a month, and we use the greenhouse gas money for the rate reduction for everybody, and we come back in a month, and just all of the revenue projections are down. We don't have that extra $2 million that we thought we had in reserves to help out businesses. So that's kind of my concern, is that I want to make sure that we're strategic, that we have, because the most important thing I think is to help keep our businesses afloat. Like, I don't need a $50 credit for my bill. I have a job, and probably most of us up here don't need a $50 credit on our RU, but the Hearth probably they could use a $500 credit on their bill.
Yeah.
So I would like to make sure that the limited pot of money that we have, we're using it to keep our businesses afloat.
Right, and we're talking about, again, $2 million, I think, from $52 million. So I still see that as a pretty small percentage. That'd be less than 4%, I think, of the reserve. And what is our goal is to 75 days triggers a rate increase?
Yeah, well, the target is 150 days.
Right.
And if we dip from now to a 75-day, we're in a sinking ship. So I'm hopeful that does not occur. So the goal is 150 days, and then you float above and underneath that based on what's happening. So the idea is that, let's say if you have 152 days, you utilize that to offset some increases that may come in terms of short-term natural gas price increases, or in the event of a drought, cost of the hydroelectric power goes way up, and we can float that cost into the reserves, and that floats down to, say, 147 days or 140 days, and then you can build it back over time. And so that's the intent of the financial management policy, and so that's kind of where we're trying to be at. And so while the $2 million of the it's not 150 million. It's $2 million versus 150 days of cash, and so our
I said 52 million.
Yeah, and so that amount is within the parameters of your policy. So it doesn't mean that you can't use it in the way you're suggesting. That certainly is your policy call, but we're fully within the policy where we sit today.
Okay.
I have a question. Is Mr. DeWalt there?
He is.
Are we legally allowed to change the funding source this evening? If it's all sort of like just changing line items, are we being sort of choosy about what we call it? Are we allowed to change what the funding source is and call it a flat $2.2 million to honor what we said, our word of what we approved last time, but just changing the funding source? And then we could later as a council or in this same motion agree to say we take $1 million in direct staff to come up with some sort of relief efforts. I mean, we could make that one fell swoop, but I'm not sure if that's legally allowed for us to switch the funding source in this meeting.
I think you have the ability to direct a different funding source. The matter that was agendized to the public contemplated approximately $2 million of reserves. I think anybody that was interested in the subject matter would appear to comment, and so I don't know that anybody would be misled. And the point of the Brown Act is to give as much disclosure as possible, so for people that are interested in the subject can come. So, is it ideal to do that? No, but I do think it would be legally permissible to change the funding source.
And just as a matter of mechanics, the changing of the funding source also changes the resolution before you. So, for instance, the resolution before you takes the reserve beginning balance, lowers it, and puts that money over into power retail sales, is how that gets accomplished. And so, a new resolution, if you choose to go in a different direction, would be a resolution in which you offset with greenhouse gas funds and directly into a rebate program for retail sales. So it's just the mechanics are different, and so your resolution would look different when you would sign it, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Is that, I'm sorry, I don't know if I can do this.
Well, I'd like to make a
Oh,
comment
I'm
before
sorry. Yeah, Councilmember Schrader.
You know, I've never supported taking reserves out for all the reasons that I already said. We have a clear opportunity to take it out of cap and trade money, which makes 100% better choice given the bad choices we're making about not targeting money and gifts, just giving $46 to people, some of which who are going to wonder why they got it when they didn't really need it, and they know somebody down the street needs more. So the optics are unbelievable, because we already had scheduled to have potentially a rate increase less than 1 year from now, okay? So we're giving money away, not even targeted, to the most in need, and the least thing we can do is do something that's a little bit smarter than taking it out of the reserves, and that is taking it out of the cap and trade. There is no question that cap and trade, if we go down this path, is the only choice that we should make instead of reserves. Taking it out of reserves is just like being foolhardy in front of the disaster that we're living through, instead of making a decision last year 2 weeks before the car fire, giving reserves away, and then finding out we had the car fire. We're actually in the crisis when we're proposing to give less just giving money away indiscriminately when there are people that need it in a very defined, targeted way. So if we're going to take money out and give it to anybody, it needs to come out of cap and trade and not out of reserves.
So you would, if the original motion were amended to take the money from cap and trade, you would support it?
Begrudgingly.
Okay.
Because we're going to be here in a year from now all talking about how we gave money away and we are going to increase rates that then compound all of these pressures on our homeowners, our businesses, when we raise rates.
And you don't feel like they're feeling pressure right now?
But there's other places they're going to get relief for crisis. When we raise rates, there's no relief to get from raising rates, because we have to do it now rather than later in a higher amount. And we've kept rates low because we had decent reserves. The point is, using reserves is not the right thing to do now, number one. And number two, whatever money we give back, cap and trade, or there's other potential targeted programs we can set up besides indiscriminately giving out $46 that I would like, as Councilmember Winter had proposed, to get that information back from RAU, where we can target it to the most needed. So number one, I don't want to send reserves out in the mail to people. And number two, I think it should be if we're going to send any money out, it should be cap and trade. And number three, I'd rather see targeted programs.
Okay.
So what
Oh, go ahead, Vice Mayor.
No, go ahead. No, go ahead.
So, Councilmember Winter, if that motion were changed to cap and trade, would you support it?
Okay, I will begrudgingly support that for cap and trade. Yeah, I still think whatever we do, don't touch reserves. Yes, I will support it for cap and trade. As long as we can come back, and I would think it would take the second week in April. I don't know that the RE will have enough time to have the information on revenue for a good financial report for other things. But as long as we can come back the second week to look at how we can help businesses.
But not with a dollar amount, not say, oh, we're going to come up with another $1 million to
No,
do X.
I don't think
from
we know
reserve-
we don't know what that is.
No,
we
we
need a
don't.
financial report, and I think that's going to take them 3.5 weeks to have that time
But I
to
think
compile that.
2.2 is the maximum now, and then
Vote
any
on
other.
this one first, and then one of us brings it back as item 12 on the how we help businesses.
Yeah, so let's do that. We have the motion on the floor,
We have
which,
the alternative motion,
right, which we need to vote on first.
or withdraw.
I'll withdraw.
Okay. So, Councilmember DeQuisto, are you willing to amend your first motion to include that the money comes from cap and trade, and that myself and the city manager will have the authority to execute that?
For the $2.2 million,
Yes.
I would be. My only comment is it's a little bit disingenuous because the reserve money comes from the ratepayers paying in it comes from a lot of places, but the large part, it comes from their retail rates that they pay in. It's their money. We hold it and administer it sort of like in trust. It's not the city's money. It's not our money to decide it's the citizens' money that we're obligated to decide what to do with. But if it comes out of cap and trade instead of out of reserves, it's still money back to the public. For the life of me, I've never seen so much difficulty giving money back that doesn't really belong to the city. But I would agree to amend my motion to say the budget resolution should have the money come from the cap and trade funds to the retail section or whatever the same place it's going to go in for $2.2 million.
And Vice Mayor Resner, would you be willing to accept that?
Yes, I'll second that motion.
Yes, I did mention that. Oh, and just to verify, Councilmember DeQuisto, you are okay. Your motion includes giving myself and the city manager the authority to execute that.
Yeah, it does. I'm sorry, I forgot
Okay.
to include that.
Okay. All right. So we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Aye.
Oh, I'm sorry. We got to do
Aye.
a roll call vote. Sorry.
Thank you. Councilmember DeQuisto,
Aye.
Councilmember Resner,
Aye.
Councilmember Schrader,
Aye.
Councilmember Winter,
Aye.
and Mayor McIlvain.
Aye. Thank you. I think that was a good compromise and good discussion on the council. So now we're going to move on to the city manager is asked to give an update on some of the things that they're working on in response to the shutdowns and the coronavirus.
Yeah, as I mentioned before, because of some executive orders the governor has issued, we're allowed to provide an update on COVID-19 issues at unagendized opportunities, and so this is one of them. So I really just have 6 items that I wanted to update you on, some of which I've already mentioned, but I'll just briefly mention again. First is the county last week approved an ordinance that prohibits evictions in the unincorporated areas of Shasta County. They have asked if we would be willing to allow that ordinance to include the city of Reading. They've also asked the city of Anderson and city of Shasta Lake the same thing. The sheriff has implored us to not create our own ordinance and instead use theirs, because that way he can utilize one ordinance to do all of his work across the county. We've given them preliminary indications that we would be amenable to that, figuring the council would be on board, and on April 7th, as part of our update, we'll bring a resolution to that effect that would allow the county to move forward. Ideally, I think they could move forward anyway, being our public health officer, and I think they have the authorities to do it anyway. But I think it would be good form for us to do a resolution and just make sure that that is clear to everyone. Secondly, I mentioned that we're discussing a TOT relief program. And that is being done in other cities as well. This would be a program which we would defer payment of transient occupancy tax until, say, July 1st. And then those hotels would need to repay the TOT, say, by October 1st. And so we're still working out some of the details on that, but that would provide some cash flow for the hoteliers and allow them to maybe stay afloat and keep above board. I've talked to a few hoteliers. They seem to be very excited about the opportunity for that, and so that would come back on April 7th as well for a resolution and your approval. REU has talked about returning deposits. As you know, we collect deposits for individuals who either have a bad credit rating or who otherwise don't have an ability bringing another utility account forward to demonstrate their credit worthiness. Or if they simply don't want to give us the ability to check their credit, which happens. And so they are developing a program in which they could return deposits. We believe that some of this is within their Directors of Administrative Authority anyway. And so we'll update you on that on the 7th, whether it's for approval or just to update you that it's happening. And that would give, again, a cash flow relief, because likely the way that would happen is that it would be credits put on their bill so that small businesses and others would not have to actually have a bill that month for their electric utility. They're also looking at ways to increase some low-income assistance on one-time payments, or maybe $100 a month for 3 months or something of that nature. Again, we think there may be some administrative authorities that have already been approved by the council. We'll update you on that on the 7th as well. There's a field hospital that may be located within the Shasta County boundaries, and we're expecting information on that at any moment as to where that location will be. I'll keep you updated on that item. And then we've also, the treasurer has frozen interest on various forms of payments from vendors who are late for various reasons, and the clerk has sent notices out to individuals who are late on their business licenses, reminding them that they are late, however, that we will work with them on late fees and other things. Two other things that I didn't write down, but I'll mention. One is that the customer service has also discontinued after today, sending out late notices, 7-day and 15-day notices, as well as charging the late fee. And so that will cease immediately after this wave of bills just went out. And lastly, I just lost my train of thought. If it comes back to me, I'll let you know. But so there's a lot going on with COVID and our response to it. We rely on the county to a great extent. They're doing a good job of keeping us abreast of issues associated with infectious cases and what they're doing. They have a daily briefing at 11 o'clock if you want to tune in. That's been very helpful to track along with what they're doing and what their issues are. Oh, I remember what the last thing was. And the last thing is that you probably saw that the police department has put up a form online that allows people to file a complaint of businesses who are not adhering to the governor's orders. That is then forwarded over to public health, who has a task force that will go out and educate the business. And if they still refuse to adhere to the governor's orders, then RPD will visit their shop. We're not issuing tickets or citations, but sometimes a guy with a badge or a girl with a badge has a lot more opportunity to convince people to follow along. So that's my update, and I'm available for any questions, of course.
Were there any questions for the city manager?
I had one. I just wanted to know how you were working. Are you meeting with the county regularly, or just by phone? Are you in regular conversations? Are you in a working group? I'm just wondering, and if you guys talked about what you do if the virus really explodes here and our hospitals become full. And
yeah, that's a great question. The county has activated their EOC. It's at level 3, which is the lowest level. And with that, at 3 o'clock every other afternoon, there's an executive conference call that includes the hospitals and other caregivers, the county HHSA, and obviously the sheriff. And everybody goes around and talks about what's going on, health and the Department of Health gives us updates on what they're seeing. They give us updates and statistics on number of beds available. So the answer to your question is yes. I mean, that's where we first started hearing about the field hospital, for instance. So there's regular conversation, and then of course there's a significant amount of just informal communication that happens either between our police chief and fire chief and others in the first responder units, and or myself and the other city managers and the county CEO. In fact, the four of us have every Tuesday afternoon meetings where we're talking separately offline from the rest of the group about what's happening and how we can all respond and be prepared.
And can you tell me if there's been any talk about perhaps using some hotels which are not being utilized right now? As people are not traveling, we probably have some empty hotels. Those could be good places for people who are positive for COVID but who have mild illness, but they could be isolated. I know that South Korea is doing that pretty successfully.
Yeah, and in fact, there's talk of hotel rooms for three basic reasons. One is that's a potential. Right now we have probably opportunities for 70% surge in our existing hospital beds because of elective surgeries being down, and so there's currently a fair amount of bed space available, but that is one opportunity for using some of these empty hotel beds. Another opportunity is for first responders or healthcare providers that get exposed and need a place to sequester away from their families. And so that's a potential use. And then the third potential use, as you've heard from the governor, is for the vulnerable population, the homeless, that may have been infected or are exhibiting signs and need to be quarantined or isolated. And so those are the three areas where they're looking at using hotel rooms at this time.
Thank you.
Yes, Councilmember Twisto.
I had two questions. One is, have you had any discussions with Mr. Warren at Turtle Bay about the $250,000 from the general fund or the TOT tax that the city's promised them, and whether his project is still going to try to go forward, or are they going to put it on hold?
So to answer your question, I have not had any conversations with Mr. Warren about either of those topics. I certainly can.
Well, I just think it would be a good idea to see what it is, given that we don't know how we're going to be in a few months. And the second one is, there was some conversation before about essential employees and non-essential employees. Have you made any determination that I can use to give to constituents when they say how many are essential, how many are not essential, who's working, who isn't working, or a time frame for some kind of answer to that?
Yeah, I mean, I have an answer today, and essentially we're a full-service city, and we're in full-service mode. All of our divisions and departments are working. We have, as you know, probably 80% of our workforce is utilities, police, fire, and the support units for those outside of those departments are personnel, finance, payroll, vendor payments. The treasurer office is collecting payments, IT supporting all that infrastructure. And so as of today, we have not identified anybody that's not needed. As the council recalls, when we went through the detailed budget of the last spring, where we demonstrated each of the general fund departments and what they do and how many people they have, I think you'll recall that we're very slim, as we have not added staff to those units since 2008. When we laid off a significant amount of individuals. And so as we sit today, we are working at almost full capacity, not exactly because we have people off for various reasons. If this continues at any length of time, we may start having some further discussions because if we have, for instance, impacts on the no recreation programs, then that certainly has an impact. We have let go, not really let go, but we have all of our part-time workers that do recreation programs. None of them are working. So I suppose you could say that they've been non-essential because they're not working. They're not really laid off. They just don't have any hours as their part-time. But beyond that, we're working close to full capacity right now. It's just telecommuting and in different ways to try to support the community.
Okay, thank you.
Vice Mayor Resner, did you have any questions?
I did. Could you repeat, Mr. Tippin, where did you say that how to report those who are non-compliant was listed? Did you say on public health website, or where did you say that that was listed?
No, it's on the Reading Police website.
Got it. Also, in those meetings in which oh, sorry. In those meetings that you are having during those daily briefings or the executive conference call, are they giving you any data or any numbers, statistics? I understand what it was that you listed, but any of, as far as like how many tests we're administering and how many we have out, those sort of things, it seems like that we're maybe only getting those numbers maybe once a week or every other. And it seems like the rest of the country, it seems to be changing drastically, even in California, every day. So I'm wondering if they have any updated numbers that they could give to you or that we could start requesting.
So we get daily briefings at the end of the day. Most of that information I've sent to the council as I receive it, and so I have asked for some additional information today, which the county is going to try to provide. One of the issues, which is a good news item, is that we continue to have just 3 confirmed cases. And so that repeats over and over again for the most part. And so that's a good news item. We want it to stay that way. But we'll continue. Every time I get that, what I do is I take it and I simplify the format and forward it to the council for ease of reading. But you should be receiving that virtually every day.
Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Schrader.
Well, I think, didn't you provide us with about a 10-page document that detailed the level of staffing and how that was going to be accomplished going forward, and in detail about who's coming in, who's going to try and work from home, and what equipment was needed to accomplish that? Was that a plan?
Yes. So a week ago or so, I sent a plan out that detailed what each department's going to do to achieve an ability to provide support to the community. Based on the governor's orders, virtually everything that we do is essential services. So even when people think about, okay, our parks maintenance workers, well, if you take the next step in, we're leaving our restrooms open so that people have access to them, clean water, clean facilities. We're spending extra amount of time cleaning, sanitizing those facilities. And our thoughts are that given our climate, that we have to keep our parks and spaces as maintained as possible, because if we don't, they become fire hazards by June. And so, we're taking it very seriously in terms of how we're approaching this, but we also want to make sure that we don't put ourselves in a worse condition 2 months down the line.
Well, I appreciated the memo. I thought it was a really good detailed list of what plans we have. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions from the council?
And maybe I just, based on Vice Mayor Resner's question, if you go to the RPD webpage, it's actually, normally they're blue, most of their stuff, but there's a big red button that says report stay-at-home violations. So.
Okay. So with that, we'll move on to item number 12, suggestions from council members relative to potential topics for future city council meetings.
Yeah, I did, just based on our earlier discussion, wanted to make sure that we come back. I'm thinking it would probably take you the second meeting in April for REU to come back with an idea of an amended financial report based on projected
Yeah, I would say
revenue
that
changes.
every week, we have better data and better information, but we do have requirement to update the emergency declaration at the next meeting, and my intent is to give you as much data as possible at that point in time. So we will report out what we do have at that meeting, but I think the 21st is a more logical pinpoint for some more specific.
And with that, could we ask that you work with REU and perhaps with the chamber to see what could be done to any further assistance we could give to businesses?
Yeah, absolutely. As the council is aware, Jake Mangus of the Chambers volunteered to work with us on a sort of task force environment to try to find good and creative, effective ways to help the business community. And if I may ask that also includes whatever else we come up with, not just restricted to REU. I would assume that's
whatever
correct.
else, yes.
Yeah.
Yes. All right. We got 3 nods here. I can't see the council members on the phone, so. Is there any other items? One that I would like to bring up is at our next meeting to have the evictions from the county. Do we need to approve that in a resolution?
Yeah, I look at the attorney. I think we don't have to, but it'd be a good idea.
Right. The way it works is that the county, as our public health officer, they have authority to legislate within the city of Reading on matters of public health. The current ordinance, which I sent to all of you via email just before this meeting so you can read it for yourselves, but the current ordinance only applies to the unincorporated area. So the easiest way to achieve that, if that's the council's desire, is to simply find some formal means of notifying the county and asking them to amend their ordinance, which you could do by motion, but it'd probably be a good idea for us to put together a resolution just to kind of formalize that a little better.
Okay, is everyone comfortable with that? Are there 3 members of the council that would be willing to revisit the other rate increases that we just imposed and potentially postponing those until next March?
Michael DeQuisto, I would agree to reconsider.
Can you bring that back in turn on the 21st, whenever it is that you're giving us a full on all of the ways in which that we're offering relief? Can you bring that back as a potential, just so that we can review all of the things?
Yeah. So yeah, if the question is that we simply would bring that back as an item of impact, either way, what that would look like for an individual and a business, and what the impact to the municipal utilities would be, then yes. If the question is package it all up for action, that would be more difficult.
And what do you-
I would like to see what the overall, because I think that it's important that we look at the entire, you use the word package, which sounds appropriate, but what sort of relief package overall can we come up? And I think that it would be important to look at all of those things all at one time.
Okay.
I'm only, we absolutely have to see what the financial impact is to the utilities that are counting on the revenue for projects that are scheduled to be done. We don't pass rate increases just for the heck of it. There is a plan, a multi-year plan that we approved as a council, and includes the number of projects that are, we get the notices all the time about the projects. So we absolutely have to have the conversation of what is that financial impact to the ability to keep our pipes in the ground from breaking and not being able to replace them. So there's a huge financial impact. Our agencies do long-term planning, and they rely on a steady hand at this with the reserves that are sufficient to cover the needs that we can't even imagine, like COVID-19 or the car fire. So I'm not in favor of changing rates. It was a small rate increase, and if we don't do this rate increase, the next rate increase is going to be larger. So what would we rather do? Have people pay in smaller increments, or that we hope the next time we absolutely need another rate increase, that there isn't some other calamity, and then we keep kicking the can down the road? I mean, be realistic. The reason why we have solid rates at REU that are $52 million less than what people be paying in PG&E is because we have had a steady hand at this going back to 2014 with the plan, and we're paying the same rates that we were paying in 2014 because of solid planning and going back and forth. And the economic development that people are looking at making into our community, they look at how we set rates, how often do we raise them, lower them, or give money away, and then turn around and raise rates at another point in time. They're looking at keeping our rates the lowest they can be, realizing we can take care of the projects and the planned work that we have to do to maintain our old infrastructure and maintain our infrastructure with REU. So I would like to see all of the information, not just what impact it is to our homeowners. I want to see all the impact to all of the utilities, that what work we would not be able to get accomplished in the time we need to.
Yeah, I mean, I just think that it's important at a time where we're having there's economic impact to our. Sorry, I forgot that you needed to call on me. I forgot I'm not just on a phone call. I'm so sorry. I think that it's just important that we look at the overall, what is the economic impact to the Black community, and what is the economic impact to our utilities, so that we can make the best plan for how is it that we keep the most things afloat and offer relief where we can. So, I mean, I'd love for that to be, I think it's wise for that to be considered as one of the options. It doesn't mean that that has to be the option that's chosen, but I think that it's valuable that we look at things on all fronts.
Yeah, and I understand what you're saying, and I agree with that. I think long-term planning is essential, and I think that our utilities have done an excellent job with long-term planning. My concern right now is the businesses today, and obviously we want to attract businesses to the city in the future, but businesses are being shocked right now like they never have before. I would say the impact is probably well beyond what we saw during the car fire, especially with small business. So I think it's important for the city to be proactive and to be part of the solution. And, you know, when we talk about the healthcare industry, we talk about flattening the curve and doing everything we can to flatten the curve so that we don't use all the resources or overuse resources that are available from the healthcare community. I feel the same way about the business community, and I think anything that we can do as a city to let some air out of the bag and show that we're with our businesses through this calamity is really important. And I want the most businesses to still be here in a year that can still pay our utility bills.
Well, when they're higher, yeah, we want them to be able to pay that in increments, not hit them with a really large increment at a later point. So the concern I have is if everything we defer now, we have to pay at some point.
That's true, and I think, you know, for with the I think water and wastewater, a lot of those capital improvements were several years out, and again, we made the decision before we knew that we were going to encounter the coronavirus. So
just a couple things. We'll prepare all that. So there's actually a fair amount of work that's happening. So on April 7th, you're going to use $2 million worth of reserves for sewer projects, just because the bids are so high. But I just want to caution, we're going to do the best we can. That's a lot to ask in terms of, you know, fully vetted plans and opportunities and all that sort of stuff by the 21st. We'll do the best we can to present the most thorough and detailed plan that we can, but just know that there may be tidbits that we have to make some presumptions or assumptions on, or other things that we're going to ask for some additional time to continue looking at for a couple weeks. But we'll do our best to bring the best plan forward to you by the 21st.
okay, thank you. Any other suggestions for item 12? Okay. All right, thank you everybody for your time today, and look forward to our next meeting. Stay safe.